It's your classic romantic comedy setup. Boy meets girl, boy proposes, girl gets shot in the head by a nail gun, boy leaves girl, girl has no health insurance, girl meets other boy works in government, boy proposes healthcare bill to other girl attaches healthcare bill to moon base bill, second boy runs away, first boy finds second boy in woods with shirtless men, first girl amasses army of Girl Scouts, while second girl starts smear campaign by calling children lesbians. We watched Accidental Love, aka Nailed, today on
The f*** is this?
Well, now that the tigers are in their cage and I've come back from Milan, I'm feeling really good about being at home and just, doting around the house.
I was reading about all of those loose tigers in Milan. That was a real problem.
Seems to be resolved, so I'm feeling really good about everything right now. It's nice to just kind of have some downtime. Give some attention to more of my other exotic pet.
Is this a bit?
Yeah, like what?
Yeah, that's me manifesting what I hope to come in the future. I actually have no desire to own tigers. I prefer that they be free and living their best lives in nature. I know there's a lot of aspects of the pandemic that have been really, really hard for people, but for whatever reason, the universe has been really good to me, and I don't know if I'm just taking it in stride, and it's been nice and peaceful. Like, obviously I miss interacting with people, and this is like a huge thing, so you're probably the newest people I've seen in a year. Huzzah!
Huzzah! Yeah, no, it's been a minute since we talked. Something that I found out last week that I didn't know about you. We're going completely out of order, but why not? We'll just have like an entire catch up before we even get around to introducing you and the podcast. Something I found out last week when I was hanging out with the Calgary boys. I didn't realize you and Tyler have a spice company.
Yeah. It's mostly Tyler's baby. I kind of helped out on the creative side because it started off as something, there was a contest between our mutual friend Corey Bolio and Tyler to see who made the best ribs.
Oh.
Tyler came up with this really great dry rub, and Corey had this like wet barbecue sauce. So we all bought ribs and then put them out. We had a big party to see like whose went away first.
Oh, that would be a fun competition to judge.
Right? Yeah, no, it was really good. And Tyler did really well. I think they both won in their own way. I have to say,
right?
Because I'm
Boo! Quit playing favorites.
The real winners of that competition is whoever was judging the ribs.
Exactly.
For sure.
Well, every guest at the party was a judge in essence. So Tyler got a lot of compliments on his dry rub. And people are like, where can I get this? And he's like, well, I made it. And they're like, oh man, like, can you make some up and give me some? And then he kind of got the idea like, hey, and initially it was just a Christmas present that we thought would be fun, like a fun stocking stuffer. And then they started using it for their friends and stuff like that. And like, there was more demand for it. So he was like, I think I kind of want to make this like a business hobby. And I was like, I'm here for it. And so
why the hell not? Yeah.
Yeah. So when we had given the stocking stuffers, I'd made up this really cute label of the three of us, and I named it because the three of our initials are TLC, and so we named it Tender Loving Carcass Rub.
Don't go chasing barbecue sauce.
And then we came up with the tag of give your meat a little TLC.
Nice.
Fantastic. That's great branding.
Right? So we thought it was pretty funny. And then it just kind of took up from there. Like, a lot of people thought it was pretty clever and there was more demand for it. Like, there's one place in Alberta that might kind of take it on as a seasoning in their restaurant. It's just a small mom and pops thing, but like, kind of a big deal for us. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Congrats. Yeah, that's how you get started.
I'll have to get you guys a sample for sure.
Please do.
Yes, well, you could be our first sponsor. Absolutely.
Hey.
Yay. Let us know, do you have like a website for that? Or
Yeah, it's TLC Spice Company.
All right, great.
Yeah.
Well, hey, we're doing this 100% backwards. We're including the plug at the beginning of the podcast.
That's how we do, though. I've always been against the grain, so this works well.
That's just the sort of unpredictability that you can expect from this podcast. And
what do we think of that movie, guys?
Who cares? We're immediately punch drunk for this one.
Yeah.
Hey, welcome back, however you wish to self-identify, to The Fuck Is This, where we dive through DVD bins, sort through streaming apps to find the weird, the bizarre, and the unloved. And welcome to, inexplicably, the 50th episode of this podcast. We somehow got there.
They didn't think we'd make it past 1, but we did it.
Yes, and we've also had a bonus episode, and we split one episode into 2, and there was an episode that we never released, so technically we got to 50 episodes before this. This is the 50th official movie that we've watched on this show, so it's cause for celebrate. Jameson, release the balloons! Hey, there we go!
I was supposed to get balloons?
There's a cacophony, there are streamers. This is 100% planned, and not something that I'm editing in post at all. This is something we planned ahead of time.
I promised myself I wouldn't try.
Very well-structured show. I'm your host, Kaz Lescard. Joining me always is my co-host, Jameson Rafter.
Happy 50th, everybody. And happy first day of spring, I think. There's official day of spring? I don't know, it looks like it's spring out there, but we're, as usual, trapped indoors.
Yes, where we will remain maybe forever. Who knows? Who knows if there's any end in sight? That's not the main thing that we're here to talk about. No, we're here to talk about what we always talk about, weird movies. And today, for the 50th episode, I wanted to do something a little special. I wanted to do something that was a little more, shall we call it, infamous than what we normally do, because we do like to sort of veer towards the more obscure movies. If someone else has talked about a movie on the internet, we try not to cover it on the show, because we kind of like to try and carve out our own library of films to shine focus on. So I wanted to do something that's maybe a little bit more well-known, but not necessarily so well-known that we veer into well-worn stuff like The Room or Troll 2, which we've been referencing a lot lately.
Yeah, like what else is there left to say about The Room or Troll 2, right? We'll just be making the same jokes as everybody else. So we try to, as you say, carve our own path. And now that we're doing something a little bit more well-known, we'll probably get like more views and more attention this way.
Which is what we should have been doing in the first place, probably, yes. So today's movie is 2015's Accidental Love. Or, depending on where you're viewing it, it's called Nailed with an exclamation mark. And there is a wild and wacky story behind this one. It's infamous in the sense that I remember reading about this movie for years under the assumption that it would just never get released, never get made. There were so many production problems behind it, and then it just farted its way onto streaming and DVD release without much aplomb. But we're here to give it a little bit more plom. We're here to up the plom ratio, and to help us out with that plom, I don't know what the fuck I'm saying, is our guest today. She's an actor and improviser, a singer and a director. You can see her on shows like Away, which is streaming on Netflix, and Riverdale. Lydia Campbell, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So, Lydia, on the show, we watch weird, bizarre, crazy, fucked up, obscure movies that not a lot of people talking about. What would you say is the weirdest movie you've watched in recent memory?
I would have to say Pi. I don't know if you guys...
Right.
Yeah, I remember Pi.
Yeah.
Darren Aronofsky's Pi.
Yes. Yeah. Really strange black and white film. And the thing I kept remembering about it was when the lead character was like, when I was 6 years old, my mother told me not to stare in the sun, but I did. I was like, hey.
That's really a line that could show up in, like, any black and white student film.
Yeah.
It just so happened to show up in the debut film of one of the most fascinating directors currently working right now.
Right, and I love his work. Like, I truly love Darren Aronofsky's work, but, like, I remember, because this was, like, you know when you're in college and you're like, I want to expand my world, and that was one of my world-expanding movies, but it was... It was very much in the realm of like, yeah, I get it. I don't get it.
I remember seeing that film, and there's a scene in a subway where I think they're trying to evade capture by like these weird corporate espionage people. And as they're like rounding the corner, they see someone coming around, like the main character like turns around and walks the other way. And that happens 3 or 4 times. And really that was just them filming without a permit in like the New York subway station. And I remember seeing that and thinking like, man, like I could totally be a filmmaker and just do like that kind of guerrilla style filmmaking. That's ingenious. I love stuff like that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I feel like this is a story that I've told on the podcast before, but I'll mention it here because I'm pretty sure one of our past guests also brought pie up as a story. I remember, I have a very vivid memory of a teacher in high school showing us pie in math class, because it was related to math somehow, and that was like totally a day where the teacher just didn't want to do any work, and it's all like, I'll just show them a movie, but like, I guess it has to be related to math somehow, so here we go, pie, that probably has something to do with numbers, and I just remember grade 11 Kaz sitting in math class, barely paying attention, and then all of a sudden, near the end of the movie, the guy drills a hole into his head with an electric drill, yeah.
Did your teachers see this before?
He might have been asleep. I don't know. The only two things I remember about that math class is that he showed us pie, and that particular math teacher looked exactly like Peter Griffin, like to a T. Those are the two things I remember about that, which is a very Peter Griffin thing to do. Show pie to a bunch of teenagers. Well, actually, I didn't even mean to make this comparison, but pie actually has a significant amount of DNA shared with today's movie, in the sense that they both deal with characters getting things drilled into their forehead. Yes. So let's delve into this weird movie, and I'll try my best to go through the backstory as quickly as I can. So, Accidental Love, which is also known as Nailed. The reason that this movie is called Nailed is because it is a romantic love triangle about a woman who gets a drywall nail impaled in her forehead, and all of the wacky circumstances that come about that particular story.
That old chestnut.
That well-trodden story element.
Girl meets
that
nail.
Pops up in everything. So, this movie was released in 2015. It began filming in 2008. The production was shut down as many as 14 times for non-payment of the cast and crew, leading to mass walkouts. The main culprit behind not paying anyone was producer David Bergstein. Now, I did a lot of I need to stop saying I did a lot of research, because all I did was read one Wikipedia page and then, like, another story. But
considering we don't get paid to do this shit, like, that's fine.
Yeah. A lot of the backstory about this movie has to do with, like, union disputes and just stuff that I am too dumb to understand, but what I've been able to boil it down to is that, like, sort of like the main catalyst for things not happening is this producer, David Bergstein, who is a financier and an entrepreneur who acquired the production company the movie was filming under. Bergstein claimed that the lack of funds was due to the 2008 financial collapse, but numerous witnesses have attested to the fact that Bergstein was just notoriously cheap and didn't like paying people, which is supported by the fact that on November 2016, he was arrested after being indicted for fraud and was convicted by a federal jury on March 2018 of defrauding investors out of $26 million, and he is currently serving 8 years in prison, which means that, once again, Jameson, we are watching a movie produced by an actual criminal.
Excellent.
So glad to be a part of that.
We had a run there where it seemed like we kept running into movies that were produced by people with rap sheets, let's say that. So, quality work.
I mean, there's gotta be an easier and less conspicuous way of doing money laundering. Because with film production, like, eventually something's gotta come out, right?
This movie is the perfect litmus test for that. It's just like, it's a movie that was shot. They had the footage, but they just couldn't release it for a multitude of reasons. And then when they finally cobbled and edit together, they're just kind of like, we'll release this, but we're not going to tell anyone that we've released it. And it would have sunk into obscurity if it didn't have just an A-list cast, which we will talk about here. So this movie was directed by Stephen Green, whose other credits include Nothing, because Stephen Green is not a real person. It is a pseudonym for Hollywood director, Academy Award nominated director David O. Russell.
Oh.
The director of films like Three Kings, I Heart Huckabees, The Fighter, Silver Linings Playbook, American Hustle.
Wow.
That
that
one
guy.
movie where Jennifer Lawrence invents a mop. Yeah, he's directed a lot. He's directed a lot. He's written a lot.
He's directed a lot of movies that I'm not particularly a huge fan of. I can't stand I Heart Huckabees.
Oh my god, I was gonna say I love I Heart Huckabees.
We're gonna get along great.
It's gonna be awesome.
I'm on Team Lydia here. I actually think I Heart Huckabees is David O. Russell's best movie. I'm not a fan of... It's definitely his most interesting movie, because after he made I Heart Huckabees, he just started doing these prestige dramas like The Fighter and American Hustle. I don't really find those movies all that interesting. I Heart Huckabees is a hard movie to parse out, but at least it's unique, and at least it's trying to say something.
Yeah, I agree. It's super quirky, like, it's different, it's eclectic. I didn't find it was, like, trying to stay on course in a specific way, and I guess that's why I kind of enjoyed it. It kind of kept you on your toes, and you kind of had to follow along to really understand.
I just think quirky for quirkiness sake is a little irritating, a little teeth grating for me. Plus, like, doesn't it lay out its central premise, like, in the first minute, where, like, everything is connected with everybody else, and then they spend the whole movie finding meaning, and then the revelation is, oh no, like, everything's connected. We revealed that in the first fucking 5 minutes of the movie. And then Mark Wahlberg gets smacked in the face with a hoppy bop or whatever.
Right, yeah.
Oh, so I am remembering it right.
There are two things that I am not qualified to talk about: union disputes and the plot of I Heart Huckabees.
Exactly.
I'm wildly unqualified to talk about both of those things.
Whatever.
Yeah, but this is the David O. Russell movie that he didn't want anyone to know that he directed, so he put someone else's name on it.
Whatever happened to Alan Smithy? Did they retire Alan Smithy?
They retired Alan Smithy quite a while ago. They retired Alan Smithy around the time I think they made a movie, which we may talk about one day because it's a fascinating movie. They made a movie called Burn Hollywood Burn, an Alan Smithy movie, which is all about the concept of a director taking their name off of a movie and replacing it with Alan Smithy, but the director of the film within the film, his actual name was Alan Smithy, so hence the humor, but that movie was so bad and was taken away from the actual director that he chose to use the name Alan Smithy. So it actually is an Alan Smithy. That's like a whole deal.
Jesus.
That movie's an absolute mess. It features Harvey Weinstein in a supporting role. We
Oh.
may cover that one day just because
Oh.
it's so fucking weird. Yes, anyway, nailed. This movie is based on a novel called Sammy's Hill, which is written by Kristen Gore, who is the daughter of former vice president and inventor of the internet, Al Gore.
Oh.
And the screenplay was written by Kristen Gore and two other gentlemen who created the raunchy cartoon series Drawn Together.
Oh, I love Drawn Together.
So a very weird mishmash of different styles going on here. I don't mean to devalue the work of Kristen Gore by just saying that she's Al Gore's daughter. I will admit I didn't look up anything else that she wrote, but I mean, that's certainly notable that Al Gore's daughter wrote this movie.
It seems funny that a movie where someone gets a nail to the head is written by someone named Gore.
I didn't clue in on that. That's very true.
That's just how my mind operates. I was also thinking of that joke. You know, this movie's two titles, Nailed and Accidental Love. I feel like I nailed accidental love throughout my 20s.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right. I'm just getting a text here. Your joke of the year trophy is on the way. It is being FedExed to you. Well done, sir.
Happy 50th, everybody.
It was about time. 50 episodes. It was about time.
50 stupid jokes that Jameson has made. We did it, people.
we did it. Mission accomplished. This movie has an incredible cast. It would take too long to talk about them all individually, so I'll just run through the ensemble cast that is in this movie. This movie features Jessica Biel, James Marsden, Jake Gyllenhaal, Katherine Keener, Tracy Morgan, Paul Rubens, Kirstie Alley, Beverly D'Angelo, Bill Hader, James Brolin, maybe the most, like, A-list cast we've ever covered on this show, Jameson.
Pretty much, yeah. It's funny that you say that, like, it's began production in, like, 2008 and wasn't released until 2015. That is a huge grab bag of a who's who between those years. And it's funny, just hearing some of those names, one that kind of just jumps out to me immediately is Jessica Biel, because I know she's had a very prolific and long career in Hollywood, but I don't think I've ever seen a Jessica Biel movie other than the A-Team movie. That's the only thing I think I've seen her in.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to run through the Jessica Biel movies in my head. The first one that comes to mind is a movie that I haven't even seen. I know she's the star of Stealth.
Yeah, Stealth is like my go-to. Remember that movie?
Yeah.
Like when someone says like, name a random movie, and I just go Stealth.
About the evil computer plane?
I think there was one called Blink. No. It's a similar premise. There's like the old school movie called Blink, but it's the same premise about like a woman who goes blind and then gets her sight back. And then there's all this crazy stuff happening because she can see again. There's paranoia behind. Yeah, that's like the 1990s movie, but I think it's not a remake, but it's just a very similar premise. Now I have to look it up because I've named the wrong title.
Please do, because I'm not immediately thinking of it. I know my own personal opinion, Jessica Biel's finest acting role is playing herself on BoJack Horseman.
Oh, yeah,
she is
so good.
She is genuinely hilarious on that show. I don't even mean that as a backhanded compliment. I think she's really funny as sort of this megalomaniacal, power-hungry Jessica Biel. She's really funny on that.
Yeah, who always does like a play on her name. Like, you better Jessica Biel leave it.
Yeah, I mean, going back to what you were saying, Jameson, about how certain actors' careers were in one place when they started filming this compared to when they released it. I mean, Jake Gyllenhaal did not have the career that he had when he started filming this. I mean, so much happened to him in between 2008 to 2015. Like, I think he went from, like, the guy... Well, when did Brokeback Mountain come out? That was 2005?
Oh,
I
shit.
guess so he had already done that by then, but...
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, because that also had Heath Ledger, and that was the movie he did right before The Dark Knight. So that would have been like 2007, I think.
Yeah, when did Dark Knight come out? 2008? I don't know. Or just this is just naming the wrong year now.
And apparently I don't know what I'm talking about. She was never in a movie like that. So
Yeah,
I'm making it up. I'm just like, yeah, that was Jessica Biel, right?
I half remember watching a movie about a blind woman who gets her sight back. I think Blake Lively was in it. Maybe you're thinking of that.
Maybe.
I cannot remember what the title of that movie was called.
Yeah, I know there is one called Blink, but it has nothing to do with Jessica Biel.
Okay. I guess that's all we can say about Jessica Biel.
Exactly.
Is there anything else we want to say about anyone else in this sprawling cast?
Well, I have a huge crush on James Marsden. I've always had a really, really big crush on James Marsden. He's just really nice to look at.
Yeah.
He's great. He's someone that I think like at least like 5 years ago or something, there was sort of the James Marsden resurgence where I think a lot of people all realized at the same time, oh, he's really funny. He should be in just more straight comedies, but he's so good looking. He often gets lumped into the bland romantic lead. But no, he's a great character actor, and when he gets the opportunity to work with that, I always enjoy seeing him and stuff.
He was awesome in Enchanted, and that's like definitely one of my favorite movies. I thought he played the dull handsome prince really well.
Yeah. Cursed with those like movie star good looks, but like is like a comedian at heart. Yeah.
For some reason, Hollywood keeps casting him in movies where he plays against a CGI cartoon and they go on a road trip together. He's done that twice now with the Easter Bunny movie and then the remake of the Easter Bunny movie, which was called Sonic the Hedgehog for some reason. So, Lydia, something that we didn't necessarily plan for and I didn't realize until we started recording is you've actually seen this.
Yeah,
already.
I have. It was a long time ago, likely in 2015 when it first came out. I am not one of those people who can recall movies and the details. As you know, hence Blink.
Yes, hence you're remembering the Jessica Biel blind person movie that doesn't actually exist.
Yeah, exactly. I went through her IMDb there's nothing like this here.
In your defense, though, if someone point blank told me Jessica Biel was in a movie where she plays a blind woman who regains her sight, I would believe that. That sounds like a movie that totally exists.
Right.
And I'm surprised that it doesn't.
Maybe I'm foretelling of something in her future.
You absolutely could have said like, oh yeah, she was in this movie called Blink, and I totally would have believed you and never followed up on it. And that would just been like...
Cool.
Oh yeah, she was in the movie called Bling, and then I would repeat that to someone who knows better, and it was like, you're a fucking idiot, Jameson.
I saw it a long time ago. Again, it happened because I have a crush on James Marsden, and I wanted to look at him in a movie.
Well, this movie definitely satisfies that field. He is in the movie, and you can look at him. So it is definitely it is a James Marsden looking film. In that respect, it is a 10 out of 10.
There you go. So, like, we're already doing well on this one. It's been so long, so it'll be like a refresher for me, and I'm sure there'll be moments where I'm like, wow, this is, like, all new to me.
Yeah, I also watched this a while ago, pointedly because this is a movie, Jameson, that I wanted to do in, like, the first year of us doing this show. And for whatever reason, it just kept, the timing never quite worked out.
Yeah, we kept getting sidetracked by watching movies that had wrestlers in it and like some weird Italian post-apocalyptic shit and all the movies I wanted to watch.
I had to pull out my old notebook to find the notes that I took on this movie. And it kind of worked out nice that this ended up being our 50th episode, because to find the notes that I wrote initially for this movie, I had to go through all the other notes on all the other movies we did. Ooh. And it was a nice little flashback for me of all the journey we've been on together.
This is down memory lane.
Do you remember, Jameson, like back in the early days of this podcast where we would actually get together and watch the movie in the same room on DVD?
Yep.
I've waited so long to watch this movie. We now have to watch it over Amazon Prime, and I still own the physical DVD of this movie. So I now own this for no reason now.
You didn't go out and buy that just for the podcast, did you? Or did you always have that?
No, in the early days of the podcast, man, I went on Amazon and I just bought a ton of weird-looking DVDs. Mm-hmm. This was also back when I had, like, a massive drinking problem, so I would, like, drink a ton, go on Amazon, and then when I woke up in the morning, I had ordered, like, 10 DVDs, and I was, like, $50 in the hole. I'm all like, Christ, I need to stop doing that.
Yeah.
Yes, this is one of them.
Gotta get my life together. I bought a copy of Nailed. Yeah. That's where
that was the turning point for me. Yes. Why do I own this? Yes. Why? I mean, Nailed isn't even like the weirdest one that I bought. Like I think I mentioned this to you off mic. But I think the crown jewel of DVD purchases that I instantly regret.
It's not a movie that like we've already covered, right? Like we watched Laser Mission and you had to get a copy of your own.
It's a DVD. We will probably never do an episode on this for reasons that will become instantly obvious the second that I show you that I actually own this. But definitely one of my top drunken purchases is I have a DVD here it's a movie that's literally called 9/11.
Oh, nice.
And it's a 9/11 movie that stars Charlie Sheen and Whoopi Goldberg.
Oh, wow. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. We could talk about it. We probably shouldn't, though.
I mean, we've mentioned early on in an earlier episode, we don't have the kind of clout to be making 9/11 jokes. We certainly don't have the kind of clout to be doing a whole movie.
Yeah. That was a vodka-fueled purchase indeed. Well, but we're not talking about 9/11. We're talking about accidental love. And you know what? We've reached the point where we're going to take a break, and we're going to fall accidentally in love, just like the popular band Counting Crows, who, that is a joke that is a reference that only me and my ex-girlfriend will understand. That is a reference to the 2004 Oscar ceremonies where a very bored looking Mike Myers comes out to introduce the song Accidentally in Love from Shrek 2. And he refers to the Counting Crows as the popular band Counting Crows, which just proves that Mike Myers had never heard of Counting Crows before that moment. Anyway, we're gonna go fall accidentally in love. We're gonna go get nailed. That's the better one. I should have gone with that. We're gonna go get nailed.
Let's start this fucking movie already.
We'll tell you all about what happens in the movie. So stay tuned, everyone.
Stay tuned. In my last charity spot, I highlighted organizations aimed at reporting the rise of hate incidents against people of Asian descent. This was spurred on by the tragedy at an Atlanta health spa on March 16th. And while it's important to call attention to the injustice against the Asian population, there's a whole other side to that story to get into. I'm speaking, of course, about the culture of gun violence that has been perpetuating in North America. Personally, I can't see any reason why someone would want to own a firearm, but I respect the right of responsible and qualified gun owners to own them within legal regulations. And frankly, I wish elected officials would have the backbone to stand up to the gun lobbies and pass the wildly popular gun reforms our countries desperately need. And yes, I said countries, the United States and Canada. While Canada does have a much lower rate of firearm death and injury than in the US, it has a much higher rate than in the UK, Australia, and Japan, and is fourth in the rate of firearm deaths among 22 industrialized countries. In fact, Canada is only one of a few nations in the world to have moved backwards with our gun reform. From 2013 to 2016, criminal incidents involving firearms were up 30%, gun homicides increased 60%, and intimate partner and gender-based violence involving the use of firearms was up by 1/3. And after a decade of decline, rates of firearm suicides have increased year over year since 2012. We need to address the root cause of violence. We need strong responses from healthcare and justice systems, but we also need to reduce the chances that dangerous, hate-filled people will get access to guns. So for today's charity, I'd like to highlight the Coalition for Gun Control. The Coalition for Gun Control has been working to make Canada safer and is supported by more than 200 health, crime prevention, victims, public safety, women's, and community organizations from across Canada. The Coalition supports legislation that includes licenses that are periodically renewed for all gun owners, a cost-effective system to track the sale of guns, a ban on civilian possession of military assault weapons, and so much more. If you'd like to make a donation in support to the Coalition, please visit guncontrol.ca/donate now. And for Canadians to reach their MPs directly through the Coalition, visit triggerchange.ca/#howtoact. Again, those sites are guncontrol.ca/donate now and triggerchange.ca/#howtoact.
And we're back. We're back from our men's spiritual workshop. We're back from the circle of shaman fire, where we grabbed a pair of shriveled moose balls and we learned something about ourselves.
That wasn't so much where we were. That was just an odd detour.
Yeah,
from
that didn't have much to do
of what we just saw. Yeah, huh? That scene came out of nowhere.
I
have seen this movie before, and I completely forgot that was a scene in this movie.
There was a lot of moments in this movie that were completely new to me. It's interesting, especially now that times have changed, watching it in 2015 and then watching it now, and how like narratives and sexism and healthcare and all these things have changed. Watching it and be like, you couldn't say that nowadays.
You couldn't infer that a group of Girl Scouts are all lesbians because they like to hold hands.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, you could. There are certain people in American politics that I'm sure very much want to infer that. But it is funny watching a movie that was shot in one decade and then released in another decade. I mean, the most obvious example of the fact that this movie sat on a shelf for so long is that the main conceit of the plot is a group of characters trying to get affordable health care for everybody. This movie was shot while George W. Bush was the president, and by the time it was released, Barack Obama was the president, and he had ushered in the Affordable Health Care Act, meaning the plot of this movie didn't really make sense anymore. Of course, we are now talking about it 2 presidents later, so who knows what American healthcare is even at currently right now, with the pandemic going on and everything too. I mean, that's a big question mark.
And funny enough, like, I wouldn't even say this movie is really presenting the best argument for affordable healthcare, not because like everyone's, you know, kind of an unlikable roguish character, but just for the fact that this is not the best way to present this to the American people.
Well, I mean, their system in itself, forgive me if we have any Americans listening, but with regard...
We barely have any Canadians listening.
We don't even know if we have any listeners, so say whatever you want.
Well, the healthcare system is a farce to begin with, so this is just a true story.
Yeah.
In regards to people trying to, like, the original crowdfunding healthcare, like, you see that all the time online, people crowdfunding for medical conditions. And
yeah, to this day.
Yeah.
That's how the majority of people get their healthcare now, is through GoFundMe, which is
so ironic
because
it's
mirror.
Essentially socialized healthcare, like getting people to come together on your behalf and trying to help you out because you're not in a place to do it. It's just These are sometimes they're people you happen to know, and sometimes they are strangers. So it's like, why don't we just make that the norm for everybody? Because not everybody has a lot of friends. It's turned into a popularity contest of life.
Yeah. What this movie suggests is that, like, to get anything done, you just have to have enough people rallying to your cause, and then you yourself can go to the Congress and plead your case. If everybody had to do it, they may as well just pass universal health care. But no, you have to actually do this huge campaign and this groundswell to get anything to happen.
And make a grand show of it all. And like, also when you think about the majority of reality TV shows out there nowadays, a lot of people are on there. It's like, I just want to take care of my family. This money, if I win this money, this is about taking care of my family. Or my dad is a veteran and he needs some help. Or my mom needs this. Like, it's never just been like, I could just really use the money to go on a vacation. Or like, I'd like to renovate my house. Every once in a while you'll get those, but more often than not, it's people being like, I really need this money to survive. So make a fool out of me on TV. I'm up for it.
Whatever it gets, like, our very unique health issues covered.
But let's make it a comedy.
You said it earlier, this movie is attempting to make a farce out of a fairly serious issue, but because the issue itself and the very basis of American politics is so monumentally backwards, no movie could be as inherently ridiculous as the current system as it is right now. But this movie tries. This movie certainly tries to make things very wacky.
Yeah, this is really one of the more sincere, straight-up comedies I think I've seen in a long time, where the premise is absurd, all the characters are absurd. Originally, I thought this felt like a Monty Python movie, in that, like, absolutely nothing is taken seriously. But then it dawned on me, and it's interesting that you said that this movie was in development hell, Kaz. Have either of you ever read A Confederacy of Dunces?
No.
No, but I'm very familiar with it being an important book that people have tried to adapt over the years, and it is apparently unfilmable.
I mean, that is like an absurd comedy with a lot of spinning plates into it, and it has been in development hell since, I think, the 70s.
Oh, wow.
And they keep trying to make it into a film, but like all the people who have ever been slated to star as the lead, from like Belushi to John Candy, have all died.
Chris Farley. It has the reputation as the cursed movie.
Much like this movie, like, it is just, you know, an absurd comedy with like moving parts to the plot that I assumed would have all sort of like come together at the end for like one amazing punchline, and it doesn't. You know, it kind of seems like it's going that way for a while, and then the movie just falls off the rails.
Well, I find it kind of interesting because, as you said prior, Kaz, this is Al Gore's daughter. So I imagine, having grown up as Al Gore's daughter, she would have a political sensibility when it comes to justice and righteousness and whatnot. So I thought perhaps this was like a hidden message of sorts. Hey, I want to reach an audience regarding how ridiculous the healthcare system is. And then a director popped in and is like, no, it's too heavy. Let's make it a little bit more funny and, you know, make her a sex maniac because of the nail. And like,
yeah,
just throw in all these ridiculous addings to make it not so, or a little bit more palpable, so people will be there and can enjoy themselves, because it's too hard to think about healthcare and socialism and things like that. So I'm wondering if that could be
it's easy to make a skewering of like the political system in America. We also have to have these like incredibly wacky situations that would never happen in the real world, but whatever. It's a goofy comedy, and you know, a straight political satire isn't gonna cut it.
We want to make
we
it
gotta make
a
it even
feel-good
dumber
movie with an all-star cast.
I mean, very tellingly, it is a screenplay that is written by the daughter of a politician and the two guys who made Drawn Together. So that does sort of, that is the tone. That is 100% the tone of the movie that we just watched. It's trying to do bold-faced political satire, but there's a roving band of Girl Scouts and a priest who can't stop getting an erection, or a reverend. And there's like a subplot about a prolapsed asshole and a bunch of men in the woods with torches trying to find themselves. Yeah, it's a whole bunch of sketch comedy jokes in a fairly serious, biting political satire, and the two tastes don't quite work. But anyway, Accidental Love, or Nailed, I mean, what is that title, Accidental Love? That doesn't necessarily mean anything. No one accidentally falls in love with one another. They should have just committed to the nailed title because that sets everything up.
I agree. It seems a bit like a grab for an audience, an attempt to, hey, look, we're a rom-com.
It really seemed like this is going to grab, because we have like an ensemble all-star cast. We have, so many A-listers, and I think around this time, like Love Actually and all those.
Yeah, I was thinking like Valentine's Day kind of deal in that regard. And
I mean, that's almost what this poster resembles, is a Valentine's Day thing, right down to the fact I think both of those movies have Jessica Biel in them.
And the Mosaic.
So this is, so this is a case of them trying to sell this as one movie, and then someone would sit down and watch it and be very confused for multiple reasons. The first thing that I want to bring up is something that I noticed immediately is, on top of all of the different titles and different versions of this, there appear to be two different streaming versions of this movie. Because last night, I was watching a little bit of this movie, not on Amazon Prime, like we just watched the movie, but I was watching it on Tubi TV, which is another streaming site that we sometimes watch movies on. I just wanted to see if the full movie was there and we were able to watch it. And what I immediately noticed is that if you go on Tubi, you look for this movie, it's under the title Nailed. But if you start watching it, the credits list it as Accidental Love. So immediately that's confusing for people who are streaming this and are gonna have to turn this off and wait, did I just start watching the first movie? The other thing that I noticed, which is really weird and I don't have an explanation for, both of these movies, the opening credits are scored to the song Mr. Sandman, Bring Me a Dream, but it's different versions of the song. And I just checked this out to confirm that I wasn't imagining it. The version of the song that Amazon Prime has is this weird sort of muted version, and the singers aren't really giving the lyrics that extra oomph. On the Tubi version, they're flat out singing the song. So I don't know why that decision was made to change the underscoring over the credits. That's just twice as confusing on top of everything else that's going on.
Maybe
so
Amazon couldn't get the rights to Mr. Sandman, but Tubi could.
Yeah, but that would be backwards.
That'd be absurd.
I wonder how many other differences between the two movies are. I don't wonder enough to actually sit down and watch this movie again now that I've watched it twice.
Well,
but anyway,
that happened to me before. I was in a movie, it was called Heartfelt, but then on different platforms it's called Love in a Vineyard. So
I like the second title better.
Yeah, it's a Valentine's Day movie, so, right?
Was that one of your many hallmarks?
Oh yeah, gotta love the Hallmark industry, man. Or Lifetime, I think it was
as long as they sign the checks, it's good. I'll take it. Yeah.
Any port in
so,
a storm.
What is this movie about in broad strokes?
It's about a woman who gets a nail through her head, and because she has no health insurance, she has to resort to sleeping with a junior congressman in order to pass a universal health care bill that will take care of the nail in her head, and the trials and tribulations of getting that to happen as they navigate Washington politics.
I also appreciate how she knows when the nail is having an impact and when it isn't. When she confessed her love to Jake Gyllenhaal's character and was like, this isn't the nail talking. It's like, is it not the nail talking?
It's not the nail. Right? Yeah.
The nail in the head is the script's way around, okay, well, we need to switch things up a little and we need to change this character's motivation whenever suits what we need at the time. Yeah, so it's a good plot randomizer.
Because it's explained early on in the movie from Dr. Bill Hader that the nail causes her to lose her inhibitions. It just makes her react. Sometimes it happens out of nowhere. Sometimes it's spurned on by a bump to the head. You really feel like the movie is going to do more with that, but it really only kind of comes up a handful of times.
And
when
necessary
they sort of
plot device, we're losing our audience. Squish, the nail, it turns.
Sometimes funny stuff happens. Sometimes Biel will be in the middle of a sentence and then she'll just start speaking Portuguese. Yeah. It's never quite, I don't know. It's all sort of half-assed and it feels like they didn't fully commit to their central gimmick, which is this is a nail in her brain that makes her act irrationally. But for the most part, Biel is kind of playing like she has all of her cards in her head. She's very sincere. I talked earlier about how funny she is on BoJack Horseman. I do sort of feel this movie might have been better served if they cast someone who's a little stronger as a comedic actor. Because Biel's just playing it very sweet, and she's a very lovely presence, but, I imagine someone like a Kristen Wiig in the role or something. Yeah, I feel like, she would have killed something like this, because she can play sort of that manicness.
And also, like, initially, the initial setup of Jessica Biel's character, we never really saw who she was prior to the transition of the nail in the head. Like, she just happened to be a love-struck girl with James Marsden. But then that kind of carried on. She was still in love with him, but that was, like, her sole identity, really. That's all she really had with regards to her plot and the progression of her character's storyline. Is just that she was in love with this guy and then he dumped her. And then she wanted to get the nail out of her head so she could get back to her life and being with this guy. And it was like, okay. Whereas the nail kind of made her, like, a better person.
A more proactive, realized person,
and have her own identity and her own sense of community. Like, it helped her get a community together with the Girl Scouts and voice her own opinions. And even when she lost Jake Gyllenhaal's character, she continued on and became a stronger person. When James Marsden came back, it wasn't all about him anymore. It was more about the fight of healthcare. So, was the nail in the head a bad thing?
You do almost feel watching the movie that it might lead to a conclusion where she's like, I'm a better version of myself because of the nail in my head. I think they ultimately have to get it out because they do bring up the plot point that the nail could kill her at any moment. And don't go through your life with a nail sticking out of your head. You should get that out. You should get that removed. It is, you hear about the central premise of this, and you do envision a movie where Jessica Biel is walking around the entire time with a very obvious nail sticking out of her head.
Like the guy from Happy
Gilmore? They do it so it's so deep in there, it's almost like
that's why
it's a non-presence.
Like, I remember seeing when she was in
the Senate at the end of the movie.
Yeah. And you could see she had this cute little, like, I don't know, baby
like a bobby
scratch.
pin or something.
Yeah. And then you could see the little nail in there, and I was like, oh, okay. So they are kind of establishing that it's there, and she's using the barrettes to cover it up. But I definitely would have liked it to be, like, a little bit more out there. Yeah.
I wanted to see it sticking out, yeah.
Maybe catching on, like, a curtain as she walks by or something, like random shtick like that.
Yeah, like a little antenna.
Yeah, like she just walks into
like
a scene.
Taller than her and she almost takes his eye out.
Like... Or somebody, like, leaning on her head and then it's like, oh, your nail.
A bird perches on it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of physical comedy that they could have added to this that I feel like it was a bit of a missed opportunity. But anyway, to add a little more color, so Jessica Biel is a burger shop waitress. She's a whiz on roller skates. Jessica Biel killing those roller skates.
That was
very, very impressive stuff.
I was impressed.
Yeah, and she's the best burger shop waitress, and her boyfriend is James Marsden, who's a state trooper who loves percentages. That's like his one comic beat is that he talks in percentages.
Brenda, I told you, there's a 55-45% chance that I couldn't get over Alice. Now let's go into 70-30. She's amazing.
Amazing? She has a damaged head.
Okay. 65-35.
And he constantly wears his trooper's uniform, even like out on dates or
at
a wedding.
Take it off.
She was also wearing her burger uniform on the date at the fancy gondola.
Oh, was she?
Yeah, she was.
They had no time to kill before they got to the...
Considering that was the moment he was going to propose.
One of those restaurants where, if there's like some job, like some carpentry to be done, they don't do that after hours or like over the weekends. Like they do it during like the busy rush hour.
Over their prize table.
Yeah.
What's interesting about the scene in the restaurant in the fancy gondola where they are having their romantic dinner underneath a gondola that is hanging from the ceiling, where the nail accident happens, there's a worker who is, I guess, reinforcing the gondola that's already being held. I don't really know what this guy's doing, but he's working with a nail gun. It's a classic movie nail gun in the sense that it works the way that nail guns do not work, in the sense that you can fire a nail at someone and will end up in your protagonist's head. That's never how a nail gun has ever worked ever in the history of nail guns, but we'll go with this. The interesting thing about this scene is that was one of, if not the last scene filmed for the movie. It was actually a reshoot, because what happened here, I have sort of the history of this movie, is that the producers were so worried that the production company was going to release an unfinished version of this movie no matter what, because they needed to hit a certain release date, that they both withheld the negatives of the film so the studio couldn't release it, and they held off shooting specifically the scene where she gets hit in the head with a nail until the very end. But then some union shit happened and the production shot down for 2 years. So that restaurant scene was shot 2 years after most of the rest of the movie was shot. So logistically, there's no reason why James Marsden should still be wearing the same outfit. They could have had him in anything, because that was a full 2 years after everything else that was shot for this movie.
That's his character. He's always on duty.
So yes, so they go to the hospital, they find out that she has no health insurance. James Marsden immediately reveals himself to be a cad, and he breaks up with her. There's a wacky family friend played by Kirstie Alley, who's a cow doctor who tries to take the nail out of her head.
My mom would love a character like that. You know, the one who's like, get out of my operating room, and it's just like, you know, the living room, and she's smoking a cigarette and doing shots before the operation. One thing I do appreciate about this movie is they kind of laid out in very quick succession answering all the questions, like why they couldn't just remove the nail, what would happen if they kept the nail in. Any kind of central question you would have about this, it answers right away, because we got to get this plot moving along. So I appreciate that. A lot of comedies don't do that.
This comedy introduces all of its elements very early and very quickly. It sort of introduces all of the subplots all in one scene. Because very early on, you know, Jessica Biel's, you know, she's complaining about the nail in her head. Very quickly we meet sort of her two sidekicks. We meet Reverend Norm, who I guess took too much Viagra and Cialis and now can't control his erection. It pops up at different points in time. And he is hanging out with Tracy Morgan, who is playing a character named Keyshawn, but let's just be honest, it's Tracy Morgan. Tracy Morgan always plays Tracy Morgan in whatever movie he's in, and this movie is no different.
Oh, I mean, like, I'm rewatching 30 Rock right now, and I love Tracy Morgan, and I think he's one of the best comedians to ever come out of SNL, but you don't really cast Tracy Morgan to, like, act. You get him to keep playing Tracy Morgan, and I love him.
Yes.
But he's not even that funny in this.
No, well, it's just weird. I mean, like, cause he's hanging out with all of these people in these scenes. Like, he's hanging out in the scene where Kirstie Alley is trying to take the nail out of their head, and they're all sort of like family and like family friends, and then Tracy Morgan's just on the couch giving color commentary, and there's just one early scene where the Reverend says, oh, I'm sponsoring him for some reason, but you're just left wondering, why is Tracy Morgan hanging out with these white people? What does this have to do with?
They needed the diversity card. They were like, we want to be relatable to all audiences, so let's just throw on that token black person so that we're good to go.
I think you could have combined like the Reverend, like make Tracy Morgan the Reverend character, and then but yeah, no, they had to include him because his medical emergency is that he had like a prolapsed anus after lifting weights too much, and now he and the Reverend are accompanying Jessica Biel to Washington because they too have these medical conditions they want addressed by junior Congressman Jake Gyllenhaal.
But is anything added by introducing these two additional characters?
No.
Like, the plot of the movie is she can't get health care, so she goes to Washington to lobby. Why does there have to be three of them?
The magic number in comedy, right?
That is true. What's funnier than one life-threatening medical condition that you can't get? Three of them at the same time!
No, it's the Wizard of Oz thing, you know? Like, they all have to go see the wizard to have their individual needs met.
Oh my god, is she the Dorothy?
Sure.
Now I'm just picturing, it's all like, oh, I want the wizard to give me a brain, and I want a heart, and I want him to fix my prolapsed anus. So they go to Washington because Jessica Biel sees a news report with Congressman Howard Birdwell, who is played by Jake Gyllenhaal, whose performance is turned up to a solid 12. I was reminded while watching this that when Jake Gyllenhaal overacts, boy does he overact. and sometimes, I think it suited this movie fairly well because everyone is sort of shooting for that level. Other times when he's overacting in a movie, it kind of ruins the movie. I was reminded, did either of you see Oakjaw?
No.
Oh yes, is that the one with the weird hippo cow?
Yeah, the hippo cow. It's the Netflix movie where the little girl befriends the hippo cow.
Yeah.
And again, that's a fairly dark, satirical movie, but Jake Gyllenhaal is playing this wild sort of like adventure reality host guy, and everyone else is playing it at like an 8, and he is just like way off on the raft. He's got like a goofy voice. He's in a completely different movie from everyone else, and he gives kind of the same performance here. But the three of them go off to Washington. They want to corner, or I guess like talk to Jake Gyllenhaal's congressman to get them on their side.
He's kind of like this weak-willed junior congressman who's like pushed around by the Senate whip. And what does he say? Like, he's got lots of charisma, but he has no he can't get anything done himself. He's just like an empty suit. And so because Jessica Biel was smitten by his ad, she like pleads her case to him. She gets hit in the head. They sleep together because apparently, like in this instance, getting smacked in the head turns her into a slut. The movie's words, not mine.
And she gets her first orgasm. Like that's a huge important plot line.
I wrote down, I think just in terms of directing style and like interestingly shot moments, I think this scene where the two of them have sex is maybe the best shot scene in the entire movie. I actually thought this was really impressive how the camera kept spinning around, and they clearly rehearsed this because there was a lot of very specific
visual
like
gags.
Comic beat, like they'd go out of frame and then they'd come back with a condom and then they'd go down. There was a great button on the scene where as she was orgasming, she reached out and she grabbed a painting of JFK and she ripped his dick off, and then she grabbed a painting of Bill Clinton and ripped his dick off. I thought that was good. I think that's maybe the best scene in the movie. Yeah. Certainly the best shot scene.
Every president who's ever had an affair while in office.
That we know.
Well, they get their dicks ripped off?
Yeah.
By the American people.
Yeah.
It's a bigger political allegory.
Exactly.
Yes. So, Jake Gyllenhaal, it's hard to get a read on his character. Near the beginning, it kind of feels like this is a love triangle where both of the men in the love triangle are just the worst. They're both assholes for completely different reasons.
Yeah.
And I guess as the movie goes on, we're supposed to like Jake Gyllenhaal's character more, but he's still kind of a dick the entire time.
And then, like, James Marsden kind of has some redeeming qualities as well, and you're like, oh, like, you want to help her, and you realize that you actually care about her. You go and retrieve Jake Gyllenhaal, so you're like, what's gonna happen here? And as you guys know, I was hoping for a brother's husband kind of scenario to kind of unfold, but alas, America's not ready for that.
Not in 2008, no. It wasn't, no.
I love you both. No, like, there's really no truly likable character in this movie.
No.
You would think, like, a movie like this needed one person to be sort of like the not sympathetic, but sort of like the bleeding heart of the movie.
And I Pee Wee Herman.
Yes.
Yeah, Pee Wee Herman saved the day. Yeah.
I think a movie like this would have benefited if, like, maybe James Marsden character was a little bit more likable, like maybe sort of like clearly a weenie, but like he was the one that still wanted to be with Jessica Biel, and she is so driven to go to Washington and devote herself to Jake Gyllenhaal, and, you know, she wouldn't end up with James Marsden, but he's like sort of the doormat who would do anything for her. But no, like, he's an absolute heel the whole way through.
I didn't find James Marsden redeemable in any way. As soon as he learns that she has the nail in her head that's gonna result in him actually having to put any effort into the relationship and potentially take care of her when the condition worsens, he immediately bails. The only reason he goes to get Jake Gyllenhaal later on in the movie, which he is not aware that they are romantically linked in any way. He just goes to get this random congressman that she asked him to go get.
He just wants her back he just wants her back because he can't have her now.
I think Jessica Biel is quite likable in this. I think she is sort of the moral center of this. Yeah, I wouldn't say everyone is irredeemable or nasty. Certainly anyone with a position of authority, like a policeman or a politician, is not good. There's that. What happens next?
Well, so Jake Gyllenhaal is sort of at the mercy of the majority whip, played by Katherine Keener, who is this former astronaut turned politician who really wants to get her military moon base off the ground. And I guess, like, Jake Gyllenhaal campaigned on, like, getting some school supplies for his district, but she's like, no, sponsor my moon base. My moon base is in trouble. Drink every time someone says moon base in this movie.
I mean, that's a great example of a joke that they thought was absurd when they made this movie. But after 4 years of the Trump administration, we know how gung-ho he was about getting into space. Yeah. He wanted that moon base more than anything else. Yeah. So
it's like elements of it were like foreshadowed, just like when you watch Idiocracy and you're like, oh my God, like, all of this really happened.
Yeah, this is not a comedy. This is a cautionary tale.
Yeah, exactly.
This movie wishes it was Idiocracy.
I know. I love Idiocracy.
I wish this was Idiocracy.
Yeah, so okay, I'm gonna lay my cards out on the table. I don't understand politics. There's a lot of discussion going on in this movie that immediately went over my head, but yeah, so Katherine Keener wants Jake Gyllenhaal to, like, co-sign her moon base bill, and Jake Gyllenhaal thinks he can get the Affordable healthcare thing kind of snuck into the margins of the moon-based bill. There's a bunch of Girl Scouts who are also there Girl Squad. That's very important. The movie establishes that this is Girl Squad and Boy Cubs is what they say in the throwaway line of time. I don't know why they couldn't just call it the Girl Scout. I guess they couldn't get the rights to the Girl Scouts. I don't know.
I love how, like, there is, you would think, like, oh, it's just like a throwaway scene with some Girl Squad.
They come back constantly. They are
prominent
throughout this movie, the Girl Squad.
There is a powerful Girl Squad lobby element to this movie, and I think it's kind of hilarious how it keeps cropping up. They're so driven to be involved in this plot because I guess if they were to sell enough Girl Squad cookies, they get like a visit from Shakira. And when that sort of is like revealed to be like sort of a smoke and mirrors thing just by the politicians to appease the Girl Squad, and they clue in on that, oh my god, like, what does that one Girl Squad trooper say? Like, I will fuck shit up! See Shakira.
That's not true.
No, Shakira.
Oh, there will be a Shakira.
Of course there will be Shakira. Or Shakira-related merchandise. If I don't see some proof, right now, I'm calling a press conference to say how Congress behind the Girl Squads, and I'll fuck shit up!
I love that.
Yeah, this movie is banking very hard on the image of little girls in Girl Scout outfits doing and saying things within the political atmosphere. They really think that is funny. They keep going back. And sometimes it is. It's a classic case of, like, you tell a joke so often it's not funny anymore, but then you keep doing it and it becomes funny again. So I guess next they go to see James Brolin, who's the Speaker of the House, who chokes to death on cookies with Katherine Keener's face on them.
Supplied by the Girl Squad. Yeah. By Teen Girl Squad.
Then she also, Katherine Keener, they magically have a defibrillator in his office. And
where did that come from? I guess all offices in the Senate just have a defibrillator.
I guess so. Their lives are important. And then she unplugs it.
Because she's evil.
Yeah, right?
Wait, I missed that entirely. Oh. Katherine Keener lets James Brolin die. Yeah. I must have blinked because I did not get that at all.
She unplugs it with her foot, and Pee Wee Herman is the only one who sees it happen.
Right.
You missed that, Cass? Because, like,
I did. I didn't see. I've seen this movie twice, and I missed that crucial plot element.
That's funny. Like, we all mentioned that the editing in this movie is weird, and like the cinematography and the camera work is like always at Dutch angles, and like the camera can't stop moving for like half a second. But that was like the one scene where like it was like straight on. We got to see Katherine Keener unplug the machine with her heel.
Well, this scene in James Brolin's office, like 8 different plot threads are all happening at this one point. Jake Gyllenhaal's trying to get his motion passed. Katherine Keener's trying to get her motion passed. Jessica Biel is trying to get anyone to talk to them. There's the thing that we haven't mentioned yet, the budding romance between Tracy Morgan and the security officer, which is a thing they keep going back to. They come back to it at the end. The end of the movie takes place at their wedding, so presumably these are important characters.
But I found it really interesting that, like, we hated on James Marsden for being like, this is a deal breaker for me, like, I can't be with it. And then when she finds out about Tracy Morgan's prolapsed asshole, she says it's a deal breaker, and it's just like, okay, whatever, I get it.
That moment really confused me, too. We're sort of jumping ahead to the end. Tracy Morgan is in love with this, her name is Rakisha, she's the security guard.
Who gets hit with a nail gun herself in this movie because Jessica Biel brings it to her to the set.
Yeah, we glossed over this. So when Jessica Biel first goes to Washington, she goes through the metal detector, and the first thing we think of is, oh, it'll go off because she has a nail in her head. She's brought a nail gun with her in her purse, and it fires at Rakisha. She freaks out, and Tracy Morgan swoops in and is all like, come on, I'm gonna take you to Benihana. So I guess she wasn't at work. I guess security guards at major Washington buildings can just leave in the middle of the day, but I don't know.
She was traumatized, what she said, because Jessica Biel was like, it wasn't loaded. And she's like, but I still suffered a trauma. I need a break.
That could have been funny if they gave time to let that joke breathe.
Yeah.
But all of the jokes just like, this movie just moves.
Fast. Yeah.
But yeah, so Tracy Morgan is in love with this woman, but he doesn't want her to know that he has a prolapsed anus. It's so hard not to laugh that that's the plot that they've given Tracy Morgan in this.
It's
sweet
enough, and she keeps like making these watercolor paintings of him that they keep going back to the well.
That is very funny too.
It's
That's
cute,
a very
but
funny,
like to no end whatsoever. It's just another one of these like wacky setups. That they, much like Confederacy dunces, we're just gonna throw everything at the fucking wall and hopefully. And I just assume like all this is gonna pay off somehow at the end, and most of it doesn't. If anything, they reinvent the wheel halfway through the fucking movie.
There's a scene at the end where they're doing like their big barnstorming, talking to Congress moment, and Tracy Morgan chooses this moment to speak up and say, yeah, she has to help me. We gotta help her so they can fix, he says, they can fix my broken ass. And then Rakisha kind of looks at him like, what? And then like a scene later, she's like, wait, you have like an inside out baboon's asshole. She gets incredibly specific about it.
You've been lying this whole time. That's why you won't let me near your backside, because you got a pop-out baboon ass.
All he said was, my broke ass.
Yeah.
That could mean anything. But she immediately knows what his specific condition is. And she's all like, nah, that's a deal breaker. I have to go.
Yeah.
And then the next time we see her, it's at their wedding. So it's like, I guess either he got his ass fixed or she learned not to be so judgmental, but it all happened off camera.
He did get his ass fixed because the bill that was passed only covered their 3 conditions.
Yes. And then a hatchet to the face and a s'mores-related
burn,
injury.
right.
Yeah, s'mores burn, yeah.
But to sort of set that up, so they go to the, everyone goes to the funeral of the Speaker of the House, including all the Girl Squad, and
we gotta get them in there.
Yeah, and Jessica Biel makes this really impassioned speech about how, his dying wish would be to everybody rally together and save, like, the healthcare bill, even though it's revealed that he spent his whole life rejecting healthcare reform. But I guess with his dying wish, he had a real fucking Jimmy Stewart Scrooge McDuck moment.
Well, but she's also lying.
Yeah.
She's also lying to serve her own means, because of course James Brolin didn't say that in his dying breath because he was too busy choking on Cookie. It's also helped that his grieving widow is there, and it's also established that she hates Katherine Keener.
Very much
so as soon as Jessica Biel starts talking, she's like, she's right. She's right.
Yeah, fuck Katherine Keener.
I mean, we're talking about how this movie was cobbled together out of bits and pieces. This is a great example of this is the fact that these Girl Squad characters are here at the funeral for the Speaker, because did either of you notice how sometimes they were like sitting in the pews with everyone else, but then there was one shot where they were like up on a balcony away from everyone else? That was weird.
I was like, what?
Girl Squad cadets or whatever, like they're fucking everywhere. I'm telling you, it's a powerful lobby in Washington. They got their hands in everything in U.S. politics.
They're like the lizard people.
Well, the lizard people who do run the government.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, that is very true. So, what happens here? Jake Gyllenhaal gets like cold feet, and he like runs away. He like jumps out a window.
Well, what happens is, so there starts to be like this grassroots effort to get a healthcare bill sponsored, spearheaded directly from the Girl Squad. And they make a video that goes viral. And so Katherine Keener starts this smear campaign where she notices in the video that Girl Squads are holding hands, and therefore, we can't let the lesbian socialist agenda, control the narrative, and it's, it would be fucking absurd and hilarious if that sadly wasn't a huge part of American politics in real life.
Some people want us to raise taxes to pay for socialist medicine. Maybe these people are bad news because they're lesbians. Committed to spreading lesbianism door to door via the Girl Squads of America. Stop the gay poison.
It can't even be ironic.
So their campaign gets smeared by evil Katherine Keener. James Marsden comes back because Katherine Keener told him to come back and try and sway Jessica Biel's mind.
Right.
But she somehow convinces him to go find Jake Gyllenhaal, who has disappeared. And James Marsden says, don't worry, I'll use my support network of state troopers to find him.
Hang on a second. How does Katherine Keener even know about James Marsden? Was that ever set up?
Nope. I
Okay.
mean, like, if it was in a scene that didn't make it into the movie.
Sure.
She just happens to know things because she's an evil politician.
Mm.
So James Marsden goes to find Jake Gyllenhaal in the most incomprehensible scene in this movie. Where did this come from?
Yeah, so James Marsden finds Jake Gyllenhaal in the middle of the woods on what? I wrote it down. Men's Spiritual Workshop.
Yeah, it's the Circle of Shaman Fire, Jameson. You're not familiar?
He's there to find his core, which either I missed it or the movie never set it up.
It was the second one. That's what happened.
I kept thinking, is this some weird fucking, Illuminati skull and bones thing that this movie's trying to, reference? And it's not, because, I know it's all fucking conspiracy theory anyways, but from what I've gathered of the skull and bones, it's nothing like how this movie depicted.
Yeah, so it's a group of shirtless men covered in mud in the woods. There's a big bonfire. There's swinging sticks around. They're just going it's indecipherable. They're not doing anything specific. They're just doing bullshit nature stuff. And it culminates in Jake Gyllenhaal punching someone in the face and grabbing a pair of dried moose testicles, I guess. And then we're moving on. We're back.
As you do.
That's all the time we're going to spend on that.
They blew their budget on the A-list cast, so there was no need for a script editor. I feel like that was them trying to establish Jake Gyllenhaal getting his humanity back, in a sense. He had to go through this spiritual journey in order to find his balls so that he could stand up for what's right.
Okay.
Yeah, because he is a bit of a pushover.
Yeah. So that was their poor attempt in resolving that issue.
But that would require this movie to have character arcs, and I don't think this movie does.
No, you're correct in that.
At the very least, set this up earlier. Set up the Circle of Shaman Fire. Have someone having another congressman mention it offhand or something. But this is also, this movie is just edited to shit. There's lots of, talking about another moment with the Girl Squad that doesn't quite make sense. They're all camped out on, I guess, the lawn of Congress, and I guess they're organizing some sort of rally or march or whatever, but when it cuts over to them, everyone has white face paint on. It's never established what it is. It's another thing. I'm missing so much about this movie.
Someone was
Please
paying
explain
attention?
this.
Yeah, there was something about them having to go through a brush of poison oak, and so they got a whole bunch of calamine lotion for all of the Girl Squad members to put on the itchy bits of. So that all the white paint was calamine lotion.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was, I missed that entire, there's clearly a lot about this movie that I was not paying attention to.
It's easy to get lost. They crammed so much into it to try to fill plot holes and be this is why this is happening. And you're still doesn't really make all that much sense, but okay, here we go. I'm already strapped in for this hell ride.
I thought it was a weird, problematic Native American thing because the head of the Girl Squad is called the Grand High Sacagawea or something. Yeah. So I thought it was some sort of Girl Squad tradition thing or something they were doing. There we go. I should pay attention to the movies I pick, I guess.
No, but this movie really was more concerned about fitting in as many jokes as it could without having any kind of structure or plot to it, or have it all weave together and make sense. And for a straight comedy, sure, but eventually it does lose the plot, and none of these jokes that are set up really pay off in the end.
We're more or less at the end, and this movie it ends with a real wet fart of an ending because it just kind of I guess the central problem is fixed.
No, what happens is, so now Katherine Keener is the placeholder speaker of the House. Before she's confirmed, she wants to bring up new business to seem fucking bipartisan or whatever. And Jake Gyllenhaal he brings up the healthcare bill that Jessica Biel and her friends have really sort of driven for. And she says well, we shouldn't listen to you, Jake Gyllenhaal, because here's all these blonde women you've apparently slept with before we met your character in the movie, and you clearly exchanged sexual favors for bringing policy to the table, therefore we're not going to listen to you. Just really sandbagging it.
Yeah, so Jake Gyllenhaal goes through this entire journey where he starts off as a bit of a cad, and then he learns to be a better person through his relationship with Jessica Biel. But then, right at the very end, it's revealed that he's even more of a cad than we initially thought, and yet Jessica Biel and Jake Gyllenhaal, they still end up together. Even though it's, I guess, like, Congress has revealed, like, their smoking gun that, oh, he's done this with a whole bunch of people trying to get, again, I'm not a politically minded person, but yeah, he's trying to pass certain bills by, like, hiding them in other bills, but the main bills are all for bad things.
I think that's a rider, and that happens more often than not in politics. And I think that's, like, what the movie, or what Al Gore's daughter was trying to, like, bring to the table. That's where, like, the political satire comes in, that, like, there's so much nonsense that happens in politics. And here's one example.
So the healthcare bill doesn't get passed, even though Jessica Biel gives an impassioned, nail-driven speech. She faints in the court, and it looks like all is lost, but then, thankfully, an aide, played by Paul Pee Wee Herman Rubens, whispers in Jake Gyllenhaal's ear. He seemingly goes over to the dark side and co-signs on Catherine Keener's bill, but then I guess he snuck in 5 specific healthcare things that only relate to the characters that we've met in this movie, and then
I love how because all this gets recapped by a news anchor at the end of the movie in a very, like, last-minute rewrite scene. He says, like, this new, like, in addition to, like, the moon-based military passing, we're including a rider that fixes conditions that include someone with a nail in their head, someone with a prolapsed anus, and someone who gets, like, constant erections. Everyone else, you're on your own as usual.
Yeah. Funny line.
Yeah, pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the movie ends in a big dance party. Tracy Morgan and his lady get married. Biel and Gyllenhaal are, I guess, the maid of honor and the best man. And the Reverend got his boner down. And that's, I guess, that everything's tied up. Everything worked out for everyone in the end.
Yeah. And instead of I now pronounce you husband, you may kiss the bride. It's like, you may kiss each other good. One last joke you gotta sneak in there. Yeah. Happy ending had by all.
So I have a couple of more trivia bits to say about this very weird piecemeal sort of movie that we're watching here. But was there anything else that we didn't bring up that either of you wrote down in your notes that you wanted to talk about right now?
I appreciated the fancy gondola. I would want to eat there, I think, without somebody working with a nail gun. But seems like a nice place to get some Alfredo pasta.
He did say it was voted like the second best Alfredo in town, so that was good. I mean, we're supposed to not like James Marsden's character. We're supposed to get that he's a little bit of a jerk. He's not wrong when he starts complaining that someone is doing nail gun work right next to their table. He has a valid point. They shouldn't be doing that during service.
Well, maybe he's come around to the nail. I mean, when he wants to get Jessica Biel back, he says, I want you back, nail and all, even though she's doing this whole thing.
It's the whole point. The whole point is she wants the nail out.
Yeah. I don't know, there are some pretty funny lines in this. Like, I think at the end of the movie when all seems lost, I think he says to Jessica Biel, like, now that you're famous, it should be easy to get you healthcare. I don't know, I think there's a couple of funny one-liners in this. Good jokes into it. It just doesn't really flow too well together as a movie.
There was a visual joke that I laughed at and then immediately felt bad for laughing at when they're talking about sort of the grassroots campaign that the Girl Squad are putting together with their cookies. It cuts really briefly to a newspaper headline that says, shock and squaw. And then I felt bad. I'm like, haha. I'm like, oh, I shouldn't be laughing at that. 2 more things that I want to talk about this movie. This movie went through a little bit of casting changes.
No shit.
Originally, the main role, instead of Jessica Biel, it was originally supposed to be Lindsay Lohan.
Oh, gross. Sorry, Lindsay, but glad they went.
And a 2008 Lindsay Lohan, that was right when a lot of her troubles were starting too, so she was just not insurable on any film sets at all.
Could you imagine how much more money they would have lost on top of what they already lost with this movie with Lindsay Lohan in the lead?
I think an unpredictable Lindsay Lohan would have played better off in this movie because that's to the character.
Well, did you ever see that movie of her where I Know How I Died or something?
I Know Who Killed Me. Yeah. That's a disaster.
Oh my god. Like, we thought this movie was bad, but you should do a review on that one.
I mean, the whole Lindsay Lohan thing is so tragic.
Yeah.
I mean, because she started off so promising, and then the system just chewed her up and spat her out, and, there's, like, right now there's the whole, there's that documentary about Britney Spears and everything,
right.
and I feel like Lindsay Lohan is due sort of a resurgence, and I think there's a national reckoning coming where we all need to admit we were probably way harsher on Lindsay Lohan than we needed to be.
Probably.
And now I feel bad about my saying you.
It's okay. You're not wrong, though. She would have been a disaster if she was in this movie, though. So two things can be correct. Other casting changes. Instead of a Jake Gyllenhaal, it was originally supposed to be Ryan Reynolds.
Oh,
yeah.
Which could have worked. Like, Ryan Reynolds wasn't, like, super popular at the time. I think he had made Waiting and Just Friends. So
would have worked.
This movie wouldn't have advanced his career, but it wouldn't have killed his career.
I don't know. Like, Ryan Reynolds, I think Ryan Reynolds is a little too charming and good looking for that role. You know, like, Jake Gyllenhaal can look like an absolute weenie sometimes. You know, what with his big doe eyes and everything.
Jake Gyllenhaal is an incredibly handsome man, but I agree. He has very intense eyes. And when he bugs those suckers out, there's like an alarming quality to him. And he does play that very well.
Very
He works
boyish.
very well in movies like Nightcrawler. And the other casting thing is, those other two were rumors, but originally in the role that James Brolin plays, James Caan was supposed to play that role, but he quit a few days before filming began because he didn't like his character's death scene. And I would just like to remind everyone that James Caan was in a movie called Santa's Sleigh, where he is murdered by Bill Goldberg's Santa Claus, who shoves a turkey leg down his throat.
Was this before or after?
This was before. This was before this movie, so
he learned his
I don't know.
lesson.
It's just like...
He was like, I could have died choking on a Girl Squad cookie in this movie with a bunch of A-list actors, and I missed my opportunities, so decided to go with the chicken legs so that something like that would never happen again. He learned a lesson.
I missed my chance to appear in a movie that was in production hell for years.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pass up this opportunity. This is my Sean
the
Connery League of
role.
Extraordinary
Like
Gentlemen,
that,
missed opportunity moment.
Yeah, and that character is barely in the movie, too, so who
Yeah.
knows? Maybe he was in a few more scenes originally. But,
I mean, why
he
even
didn't miss much.
I don't know, why even go with like a character, why even go with an actor as big as like Josh Brolin and, not Josh Brolin, but James
His
Caan.
dad.
Yeah, for a scene like that. Why even have Paul Rubens in this movie for such a
that was a
know-nothing
waste.
character?
Yeah.
What a waste of
That was
Paul
a real
Rubens.
nothing character. Yeah, Paul Rubens really doesn't get much to do except look beleaguered and not agree with Katherine Keener and save the... And there's a moment where Jake Gyllenhaal is having Katherine Keener is having an interview, and he like sneaks up behind her and he does a little dance, and it's impossible not to see Pee Wee Herman in that moment. Like, you expect him to go, ha ha! The last thing that I want to say about this movie is I find this very funny here. So, for the Canadian DVD release of this movie, which is, weirdly enough, not the DVD that I own, the back cover contained a quote from AV Film Club critic A.A. Dowd, and it called the film a comedic masterstroke. What Dowd's actual review said was, to be fair to whoever refashioned Accidental Love from the abandoned scraps of Nailed, there's little reason to believe the ideal, untroubled version of the material would have been a comedic masterstroke. So Dowd called out Mongrel Media for taking his words out of context in a very funny takedown article on the AV Club titled, "No, I didn't call your shitty movie a comedic masterstroke." And Mongrel apologized and said they would remove the quote from future prints.
Oh my goodness, that's probably the most redeeming fact about this movie.
That's hilarious. Holy shit, I wish more publications did that.
Gold.
Gonna fucking sue them for libel.
The AV Club is great. What is not super great is the movie Accidental Love, aka Nailed. Jameson, Lydia, would you recommend this movie to anyone, having seen it now?
If you're looking for something smart to watch, no. If you like to look at beautiful people...
I mean, they're in it. There's beautiful people in this.
Like I said, I keep getting hung up on it, but like a brother-husband's vibe could have worked out really well for a nice little ending there. And, it's progression when it comes to love and sanctuary and health in a different kind of way. But yeah, definitely not something I'd recommend if you're actually looking to be entertained.
At the start of this movie, I thought, like, because the jokes just kept coming at a mile a minute, I began the movie liking it, and then as it went on, it really just lost me in several different ways. Oh man, I thought this was going to end a little bit better than I did. So the first maybe 10 minutes are good comedy, and then it just got away from itself. So no, I wouldn't recommend this whatsoever. I thought this started looking like something, my mom would kind of like this movie. She'd get a crack out of like the mile a minute jokes, and then right around the time that the Speaker of the House has a fucking heart attack, and it's like, what the fuck is happening anymore? Like, that I would not recommend this movie.
Yeah. Nah, I can't. That one scene was a real mess. I cannot get over how much plot they tried to cram into that 1-2 minute scene.
And it never recovered from it either. So
no, it really didn't. No. I would recommend this movie as just a bizarre artifact of what can happen when a movie completely self-destructs on itself, and someone is left with the broken pieces in their hand, and they look at it and they go, like, maybe if I do this, like, maybe, like, I know, like, it doesn't quite fit together, but maybe if I just kind of, like, mash it together and release it under a different name, someone might find enjoyment out of it. I think it's a really interesting cautionary tale. I think there's obviously is a much more interesting movie buried deep beneath the ashes of this that occasionally pokes its head out. It would have been fascinating to see what David O. Russell's full unmessed with version of this was, because, very pointedly, he made this around the same time. He made I Heart Huckabees, and he was kind of known more as a comedy director back then. Like, he made Flirting with Disaster, he made Spanking the Monkey. Three Kings is kind of a comedy, but after this movie failed, he just made like a sharp turn into prestige Oscar baity dramas. I guess Silver Linings Playbook is kind of a comedy, but
he never gave up on this project,
Well, no, Jameson, no, he 100% gave up on this project, which is why he took his name off of it.
Someone, never gave up on this fucking project for whatever reason. It eventually saw the light of day, I guess.
Another thing that I read on Wikipedia is that both Jessica Biel and Tracy Morgan were somehow contractually obligated to come back and do reshoots for this. David O. Russell was not. So there are scenes in this movie not shot by David O. Russell, and no amount of digging I can find has unearthed who the replacement director was. The director didn't want his name on this, and whoever picked up the pieces of the director not wanting his name on this did not want their name on this. So yeah, this is an abandoned movie.
Who did want their name on this?
It's kind of fascinating. Well, that's that. Lydia, thanks so much for hanging out with us today and being on the podcast. We really appreciated it.
It was a lot of fun, guys, and I look forward to hearing all the adventures and spreading the awesome to all my friends to listen in to this wicked podcast. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, that's the crowd that we make the podcast for. Our circle of friends. I have like one friend in Williams Lake that I know listens to every episode, and more than anything else, I continue to just make the podcast for him. So, hi Chris, I hope you enjoyed the episode. Do you have anything that you want to plug right now? Please plug your work. Plug your spice company again, please.
Yes, okay. So my husband and I have a spice company called TLC Spices. We have a website online you can check out. We have our Tender Loving Carcass Rub and the Tender Loving Courgette Rub for all you vegetarians out there. With regards to some of the work I've been doing, I recently did an episode of Riverdale, so you can catch me on season 5, episode 9. I also have a Christmas movie coming out with Annalyn McCord. She is on the reboot of 90210. It's called Christmas on Your Toes, and I play her amazingly, what's the word I'm looking for? I encourage her, amazingly encouraging good friend. The lifetime plot that everybody loves and knows. You can check me out in that come Christmas time. And then I'm also on yet another Hallmark series called Aurora Teagarden, playing a lady named Holly. So me out. I'm sure I'll have upcoming projects again soon. So Yeah, you can follow me on IG, the strange_and unusual Lydia C.
Fantastic.
Right.
Awesome. Everybody do those things. Jameson, do you have any recommendations for our listening audience this week?
Oh, recommendations. You know, a show that I got into recently was something I picked up over, like, St. Patrick's Day was a couple of weeks ago, but as is tradition, I want to watch something Irish around then. And I got into Dairy Girls, which is a delightful little comedy about girls in Northern Ireland growing up during the Troubles. It's a very funny show, something I absolutely recommend people watch with the subtitles on. It's very cute, and I recommend that. Other than that, like, no, nothing to really recommend. Something like, I haven't gotten much chances to check out new stuff just yet, but tomorrow's another day.
Great. Yeah. I'm just realizing that I was going to plug 2 other podcasts, but I didn't write it down, and I don't have the information in front of me. So I'm going to save that for next episode when I actually bothered to do the work.
They're not that memorable, eh?
Yeah, I guess I don't have anything. I guess I have no plugs. What will I use this time to say? I guess I'll use this time to say rest in peace to the great DMX, who is the star of probably the worst movie we've ever covered on this podcast, Last Hour. Is it the worst movie we've ever covered on this podcast? That's an interesting question. One that we will answer with our next episode, because the next episode, we're doing something a little different. There's no movie, there's no guest, and we will be ranking all 50 movies that we have watched on this podcast.
Yeah, nice little
we are not 100% sure how we're going to do that, but we're going to figure it out. All right, so that's a little peek into next week, and that was Accidental Love, or Nailed, directed by David O. Russell, or Stephen Green. If you like this episode and want to hear more, we got 49 more of these fuckers on Spotify or in the TuneIn app, or you can follow us on our YouTube page where our episodes have a slightly more visual element. For information on when new episodes drop, you can friend us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram at the F Is This Podcast, or stalk us on Twitter at the F_is_this. And now, with our episode-specific catchphrase, Jameson Rafter.
This line came early in the movie when Kirstie Alley's veterinarian character was about to remove, or to attempt to remove, the nail from Jessica Biel's head.
You know, you can just say the catchphrase, right? You don't need to, like, build up what the catchphrase. You can just, like, take us out on a strong note, but...
I just wanted to mention that, like, this, I think, really applies to our podcast in general.
Okay, alright, good. With the context, good.
Bless this crazy ramshackle operation.
Hey.
You know what? I do appreciate that. I appreciate the context. Thank you, Jameson. That's why you get the big bucks.
That's why you don't fucking interrupt me, Kaz. There's a method to my madness. You see how my mind operates? It's like a fucking laser.
Bless this crazy, scary ramshackle operation.